Professor Vimi. Okay. Welcome, madam, to our session. And Professor Chaitanya Sengupta, she is from Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research from Kolkata. So first, I'd like to invite Dr. Kulvinder Singh from Haryana to carry on with his oral presentation. And time allocated is 8 minutes for presentation with 2 minutes for discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, respected chairpersons, my dear friends and colleagues.
Hello, check. Hello, check.
The topic of my oral presentation is dry needling in symptomatic supraspinatus calcific tendinopathy. It's an early experience. We have done 11 cases in this. These are the co-authors, Dr. Sir Singh and Dr. Ritchie. This was the abstract that was published. With the background, I would like to start that calcific tendinitis, as we all know, is a frequent cause of non-traumatic shoulder pain. The prevalence is quite high. It's about 5% in the population, and most of the cases they go unreported because of they are asymptomatic. The common age of presentation is 30 to 50 years. 70% cases are females, and pathologically it is the deposition of calcium carbohydroxyapatite in the tendons, and most common sites are supraspinatus tendon, that is 80% of the cases in rotator cuff tendons, then infraspinatus and subscapularis. A little bit about the history and pathophysiology. There are various theories regarding its pathophysiology, its origin. People have said that the cause behind this could be degenerative. In the early, around 1938-39, they said that it's degenerative and reactive with cell-mediated immunity. The recent ones are endochondral ossification and chondral metaplasia, which are the recent acceptable causes of pathophysiology. Little bit genesis. When we have the tendon injury, most of the time it goes into the tendon healing, that is normal process. And in presence of certain metabolic disorders, genetic predisposition, drugs, etc., they lead to failed healing response, and that lead to calcific tendinopathy with this certain markers that elevated in the study. Rutherford and Lohr described a three-phase process of calcific tendinitis, that is pre-calcific, calcific, and post-calcific. In the pre-calcific, they have divided it into three stages: formative, resting, and resorptive. These are the three stages which are very important as far as treatment is concerned, because these are the phases where patient will be having pain. Formative will be associated with mild pain, resting will be moderate, and the resorptive will be having higher amount of pain. And the cause behind the formatting, in the formatting there will be deposition of calcium only. In the resting, the calcium will get matured. And in the resorptive, there will be neoangiogenesis, and there will be resorption of the calcium. So, now the clinical symptoms, they primarily depend upon the stage, as I have already discussed. There are three stages, and the pain of the severity of pain is related with the calcification size and location. Most of the pain is in the resorptive phase. Why? Because of the rising pressure of the liquefaction of the calcification that causes the pain. And apart from the pain due to calcific tendinitis itself, the pain could be because of the certain complications like extravasation of liquefied deposit into the subacromial bursa, the crystal-induced bursitis, or that could be impingement syndrome. The treatment and management, as such, we have most of the cases they are self-limiting. Conservative treatment is applied, while in symptomatic patients there are certain USG guided interventions that can be done, like bursal steroid injection, needling, 1 needle, 2 needle technique, and with or without lavage. And there could be combination of any of these techniques. And recently PRP is also being used in this USG guided intervention. Then we have extracorporeal shockwave therapy. It could be radial and focal, and any combination of these. And then last we have surgery as well. The aims of the studies were to study the efficacy of dry needling in terms of symptomatic improvement and the time taken for clinical response and resolution of the calcification. It was a prospective study. The study was started in June 2015 and 2014, sorry. And 11 consecutive patients with shoulder pain were included in the study with visible calcification. Patients were asked to rate their pain according to NRS 11. And after taking consent, dry needling was performed. The patient was in the sitting position with back against the detention position, and the machine was in front of that. The needle was inserted in the in plane, and the machine used was Philips SD11 probe, linear probe L12-3. After giving the local anesthetic, single pass was taken through the surface of tendon, and needle was inserted into the tendon substance, and it was tried to break the calcification and aspirate if possible. 15 to 20 pricks were done in the same setting, both superior and inferior to the tendon as well. And on completion of the dry needling, from the same needle, the subacromial and subdental bursa were injected with 1 ml triamcinolone, that is 40 mg per ml, and 4 ml of bupivacaine, 0.25%. The ice pack was kept for half an hour, and patients were instructed to immobilize the shoulder for 1 week, following which eccentric physiotherapy was started. The patients were followed up after 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, and 3 months, and 6 months. And NRS 11 was reported at 2 weeks, that is short-term relief, and 6 months for long-term relief. Radiographs were taken at these intervals as well, 2 weeks and 6 months. Now the inclusion criteria of the study was age of the patient should be between 30 to 60 years, symptomatic patients with NRS 11 more than 4, and radiographic presence of calcific tendinopathy. The exclusion criteria was any coexisting shoulder instability, dislocation, rotator cuff tear, frozen shoulder impingement syndrome, septic arthritis, severe TJD, because they will mask the symptomatic relief. So we have excluded these coexisting shoulder problems, and allergic to drug was also excluded. This was, the video is not, it's running. The needle was injected from the lateral aspect. This is the calcific tendinopathy, and this is the 18 gauge needle that was introduced, and sorry. Yeah, this was the needle that was introduced into the. We tried to break the calcification itself from that needle with the 15 to 20 pricks, and yeah, this is the force. You can easily see that the needle is trying to push the calcification, and later from the same needle we injected the subacromial. This is the bursa, which is getting filled with the local anesthetic and the steroid, triamcinolone and the bupivacaine. From the same needle, while retrieving, we injected the this thing into it. So these are the results. There were 11 patients. Most of them were female. 8 were female and 3 were 8 were female, and there were 3 were male. And age group, 9 patients belonged to 30 to 50 age group, and there were 2 patients that were from 50 to 60 age group. Yeah. This is the pre-procedure, post-procedure at 2 weeks, and post-procedure at 6 months NRS that was reported. We can see that there is significant improvement in NRS score in the post-procedure immediately as well as in the long term. There was one case where there was no improvement in the pre-procedure, and there was one case where no significant improvement was reported between the 2 weeks and 6 months follow-up. This is the size of calcification that was reduced initially. This blue line represents the initial size in 8 patients that they have completed their 6 months follow-up. And this is the blue line represents the size of calcification initially pre-procedure, and this is the size of calcification at 6 months follow-up. We can see the R square as well, value as well. So there is significant reduction in size of calcification as well. And in 5 cases, we have seen that complete resolution of calcification. Though the initial size at these was relatively small, like over here it was around 3, the size of the calcification was 3 mm, and over here also it was slightly less than 3 mm, and it was around a little higher than 2. So this was a case where we can see that there is significant, there is complete resolution of the calcification after the procedure. In this case, we can see there's significant reduction in size of the calcification, and fragmentation of calcification is also noted. So, if we discuss in the discussion, the result of study demonstrated basic and percutaneous needle followed by intramuscular steroid injection. It facilitates prompt pain relief and functional recovery. And similar studies have been done in the past, but very few. Initial was done in 1996, and in this study there was after percutaneous needling there was 90% symptomatic relief, and the complete radiographic resolution was reported in 50% or 54% of the cases. Another study reported symptomatic relief 91% and significant reduction in calcification, and perfect motion was achieved in range of motion was achieved in 64% of the cases. This is the recently studied. It has divided the study into two groups. One group where they have compared the ultrasound guided percutaneous needling and lavage versus the simple subacromial injection of corticosteroid. These two groups, they have found that the first group has significant better than the second group alone, where they have injected the corticosteroid alone. So combination of needling and corticosteroid definitely gives an edge. And to conclude, the percutaneous needling of supraspinatal calcification with pulsar steroid is an effective intervention to improve patient outcome in terms of symptomatic relief and resolution and reduction in size of calcification. However, larger ongoing study is expected because it's a pilot study and we are still working on it. It will provide more reliable evidence. And limitation of study was, it's a small study and we have not taken any control group, and comparison can be done later on between the various methods like single versus double needle versus with and without steroid and PRP, and calcification are not similar. As we have seen, there are various sizes of calcification, and so that also affects the study. Thank you so much.
And there was a slight exceeding the time, slightly exceeding the time, but considering the mechanical problem we had with the computer, so open it for discussion. And first I'll Professor Mimi, your comments.
I just want to know what is the duration of the study? You conducted these patients over how much time?
It's 14. We started in June 2014, and it's August, so around 13 months already. So we have completed 8 patients, total 11 patients. 8 have completed the 6 months follow-up, and 3 are we have completed the short term.
And how many patients do you generally have with calcific tendinosis?
Calcific tendinosis, actually the exclusion criteria, considering the exclusion criteria, we are getting so many calcific tendinosis.
I want to know the total number of patients that you see, not for the study, but generally for the total number of
Generally
patients.
around we see 3 to 4 patients a month.
A month. Okay, so most of them were excluded because that makes it about
But
almost
if
36
the age is,
patients.
if the patient is out of the age bracket and having any coexisting disease, then it has to be excluded. Because otherwise we won't be able to see the symptomatic
And
relief per se.
what is the routine management of these patients?
Most
Are you doing needling for all the patients? Or?
No. Mostly the patients are only little bit symptomatic with minimal shoulder pain with normal range of movement. Those patients were treated symptomatically with the drug
So would
treatment.
you not
only. In
recommend-
those cases we don't. Also the size of calcification is important. Though there is no fixed criteria how much
Exactly. I
size
want to know that.
should undergo the needling. But everything is trial based, so we are expecting that if the patient does not get better with the drug treatment, then we can.
What drugs are you?
Normal NSAIDs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, madam, Dr. Dansukta.
I want to know one thing, if you divide it into 2 groups in future, you will make another strategy 2 groups, how you will make the control and what is your plan to make the other group?
Ma'am, the other group we would like to start with is PRP, because PRP is coming up very good, and a lot of people are reporting that PRP is a very good intervention that can be
Then there
done.
will not be any control group, it is clear.
Control, yes, we can take where we will not give any treatment. There will be, because it is a self-limiting disease, and the report says, literature says that it takes 43 months, 43 weeks for the patient to resolve itself. But the duration of pain, the patient is facing that pain, so we wanted to reduce that symptoms only. So intervention is done to reduce the symptom.
Will it be ethically possible to do to the patients who will come to you and you will not give them any treatment?
Is it everybody?
But it's depend upon the scale we have used. If the patient will judge himself that okay, I am having this much of severity of pain with NRS more than 4, then we will definitely take the patient for the intervention. Otherwise, if the patient is having mild pain, then there is no
Then
need
they will
because
not be proper controls.
yes,
The control route will not be similar to the intervention.
that is
That is the problem with these kind of studies. Because ethically it is not right to
that is
treat the pain. So it's more of a case series than a study.
yeah. Actually, we started it. So recently we've done 11 cases, so I wanted to present
Thank you
it.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. I'll just interrupt for a few minutes. I'll just like to call upon the names and know who all are there will be presenting. So next I think will be Priyanka Ghosh, and then we have Ajay Basri here, okay, and then Moumita Hawal, and Shamur Haldar, Syed Fazal Mahmood, and Anup Singh Negi. Dr. Anup Singh Negi. Dr. Prithvish Ranjan. Dr. Prithvish Ranjan. Dr. Ashutosh Singh. Dr. Atish Pal. Dr. Varun Singhia. Varun Singhia. Dr. Mangal Alawat. Dr. Priyanka Ghosh, he is a fellow from TMC, and like Simotika to please help me keeping the timing.
Good morning, everybody. Today I'm going to present the topic, does preemptive GABA painting or pregabalin reduce acute post-operative pain after lower limb orthopedic surgery under subarachnoid block, a randomized controlled study. We all know the definition of ISP definition of pain, but I would like to begin with what Milton said in Paradise Lost. Pain is perfect misery, the worst of evil, and excessive overturns all patients. This is true because it is pain which is very annoying for the patient as well as a nightmare for treating anesthesiologist. So how does it all begin? It begins with a surgical incision. We all know that pain from surgical site does not travel in a hardwired pathway. Rather, it leads to a cascade of alteration in the somatosensory system, leading to increased responsiveness in the central and peripheral neurons, leading to central sensitization and hyperexcitability, which increases the amplification of pain, resulting in increased postoperative pain and further development of chronic pain. So what does preemptive analgesia do? It is an anti-nociceptive treatment which begins before the surgical incision, operational during the surgical procedure, and it prevents central sensitization and hyperexcitability, leading to decreased postoperative pain and further development of chronic pain. This is pregabalin and GABA painting, my study drugs. Both are the structural analog of GABA, but pregabalin is unrelated to GABA. Both have been used, in as anticonvulsant, and pregabalin has a better pharmacokinetic profile than GABA painting. My aim is to compare the efficacy of GABA painting and pregabalin as preemptive analgesic to prevent postoperative pain and lower limb surgeries. Objectives are to compare the duration of analgesia, to compare the reduction in requirement of analgesics, to study the side effects and complications. We proceeded with an ethical committee clearance. We took an informed consent and a pre-anesthetic checkup was done. 50 patients in each group with a power of 80% and alpha value of 0.05 was taken. So total 150 patients were randomly allocated into 3 equal groups. Group G received gabapentin, Group P received pregabalin, and Group C received a placebo drug. Inclusion criteria were age, physical status 1 and 2, age 25 to 75, of either gender, posted for lower limb orthopedic surgery under subarachnoid block. Exclusion criteria were a known allergy to the study drugs, any contraindication for study drug, pregnancy, obesity, renal insufficiency, history of heart failure, history of drug abuse, any psychiatric disorder, and excessive side effect to the first dose of study drug. Patients were randomly divided into 3 groups. Group G received 600 mg gabapentin, Group P received 75 mg pregabalin, and Group C received the placebo drug, which came in a sealed envelope. 2 doses of each drug was given 12 hours before surgery or night before surgery and 2 hours before surgery. We gave a titrated dose of 0.5% bupivacaine with 25 microgram fentanyl in a subarachnoid block, and VAS score was immediately noted down, and every 2 hourly for 36 hours. And VAS score, if was more than 3, was administered with diclofenac 1 mg per kg body weight IM. Results were analyzed using statistical software SPS version 16. Categorical variables were compared with chi-square test, and continuous variables were reported through ANOVA test. If any p-value was less than 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis or else accept it. So beginning with the statistical analysis, this is the bar diagram showing age and weight. What we saw was this is comparable among the 3 groups. So was the age and physical status. Most of the patients were from age and physical status 2, but the variables were comparable and this was statistically insignificant. So was the duration of surgery. And this is the table showing distribution of types of surgery. We took ACL repair, dynamic hip screw, cannulated hip screw, bipolar hemiarthroplasty, etc. And these values are again statistically insignificant when we compare the 3 groups. So the demographic profile was statistically insignificant among the 3 groups. Now comparing the post-operative analgesia per se, the first parameter was time to rescue analgesics. That means from the time the spinal anesthesia was administered to the first dose of rescue analgesic. In the group P, we see 11.22 hours, group G, we see 7.3 hours, and in group C, the control group, 4.62 hours. When these values are compared, group P and C is compared, it is statistically significant. When group G is compared to C, it is also statistically significant. And most importantly, when pregabalin group is compared to gabapentin group, this is also statistically significant. Now coming to number of doses in 36 hours, it is 1.92 in pregabalin group, gabapentin group it is 2.04, and in control group it is 2.26. These values are statistically significant when P and G are compared to C, but not when P and G are compared to each other. Now the total dose of analgesics, it is 115.74 in pregabalin group, 121.68 in gabapentin group, and group C it is 135.5. So these values are again statistically significant when P and G are compared to control group, but not when both are compared with each other. Now coming to number of doses in 36 hours, we see that around 4 patients required only 1 dose in 36 hours in the control group, which was 12 patients in pregabalin group. But going to 3 doses in 36 hours, it was 34 in the control group, which was much lesser, 4 in pregabalin group, and it was 12 in the gabapentin group. So pregabalin and gabapentin are definitely better than the control group. Now coming to the side effects in 36 hours, we saw nausea, vomiting, dizziness, somnolence, and urinary retention in the patients. And what we found was dizziness and somnolence was much higher in gabapentin group than pregabalin and the control group. But these values are not statistically significant when all the 3 groups are compared. So to conclude, 75 mg pregabalin is better than 600 mg gabapentin as preemptive analgesic in lower limb orthopedic surgery when given in 2 doses before surgery, and both the drugs are better than a placebo, and and both can be used in multimodal therapy as a safer alternatives to opioids and NSAIDs. But further studies are needed to determine the long-term effects and benefits of both the drugs. These are my references. Thank you, and my thank you will be incomplete if I don't thank my guide, Dr. Shoikat Sengupta. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka, for the fantastic presentation. I'd like to ask Professor Mimi for her comments.
Yeah, Priyanka, how did you conclude that pregabalin is better than gabapentin?
Ma'am, the time to first dose of rescue analgesic was more prolonged in pregabalin group, and it was also statistically significant with respect to gabapentin. And other values are not statistically significant though, but it was better than gabapentin group.
Only when it's statistically significant, your conclusion first.
No, ma'am, we have to compare all the optimal dose. We don't know the optimal doses of for different surgeries, and it's just observation.
I know. So that is why just on, because the total doses required for the groups is equal, the total duration of anesthesia would be equal, except for the time to the first rescue anesthesia.
Otherwise, they were comparable, yeah.
So I don't think you can make a conclusion that pregabalin is better. It is, both of them are better than the placebo, but amongst each other it's not.
Ma'am, but
What was
for
your
this 75 milligram when compared with 75 milligram pregabalin, when compared with 600 milligram gabapentin, that is better. That's what I meant. I didn't mean that pregabalin is better than gabapentin.
No, but that is the dose of pregabalin and gabapentin.
They in the different study they have used it from 50 to 150, 300 milligram also they have.
But
used.
unless you have a dose with a study just comparing 75 milligram and 150 milligram, you cannot come to a conclusion that
Yes.
such and such dose is better or worse or whatever. Okay, that is one. What was your primary outcome of the study?
Primary outcome was this dose pregabalin and gabapentin better than the placebo group, and
That is not the outcome. How did you calculate the sample size?
ma'am, it was with the alpha value of 0.05 and the power of 80%.
What is, no, when you calculate the sample size, you have to know what is your primary outcome.
We look for the time to duration of first rescue analgesics, then then the mean number of doses in 36 hours.
There is just one primary outcome. One outcome should all, primary outcome is only one, on the basis of which you calculate the number of patients required in the sample.
It's time to rescue analgesic, first dose of rescue.
Okay.
What initiated you to do this study?
Ma'am, pain is the major concern in the lower limb orthopedic surgery, and we wanted to go for something safer than NSAIDs, which we generally use in post-operative period in the orthopedic patient. So we thought of this study.
Why you have included the control group here?
Included the control group to see